Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh bidvaro. The central prayer of every religious service is the Amidah. We stand up and our thoughts and our words, our sentiments are all directed to the Creator, to God. How do we say that? How do we express that? We say, Elokeinu, our God, Velokei Avotenu, also the God of our fathers. Not only of our fathers, then we say Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Velokei Yaakov, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. We insist on that. Why do we insist on that? Shouldn't prayer be something personal? Should be intimate. It should be very subjective to the individual. Why do we invoke our parents, our grandparents? We invoke the patriarchs of the Jewish people, those that set everything in motion. Maybe because in science you have certain rules, but when it comes to religion, to sentiment, to faith, you have other rules. Have you heard of something called disruptive technology? That means that certain things that you were doing up to a certain point are no longer valid. For instance, do you remember what a typewriter is or was? Do you remember the name Selectric? A little ball, an electric typewriter, an IBM typewriter. Do you know what proportional spacing means? That means that the letter M, which is very wide, and the letter I, which is narrow, occupy different spaces. And that is called proportional spacing. All these are terms that belong to ages ago, eons, centuries ago, actually, only a couple of decades ago. Nowadays, with a laptop, with a computer, with a printer, you don't need all these things. Who has a typewriter today? I think you have to go to a museum to see a typewriter. Do you know what photographic film is? Many a time a photographer would forget to put in film into his machine, nothing would happen. Today there is no film. That is totally obsolete. Digital photography is a disruptive technology. What happened before doesn't exist anymore. You want to buy a TV that has 2 feet depth to it? There is no such thing. Everything is just a couple of inches and narrower every day. These are called disruptive technologies. But when it comes to sentiments, when it comes to feelings, when it comes to something like hate, love, envy, these things were true 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, and they're still true today. So therefore, there are certain things that change very much, in technology especially, but in other things, no. When it comes to faith, even though it's an individual commitment of the person, an intimate relation of myself and God, yet I want it to be rooted in the tradition of my ancestors, of those that were in previous generations. One of the phrases in the Amidah, and Rabbi Soloveitchik makes mention of it, why do we say Peleitat Sofrehem? The remainder of the scribes, because in a certain way we want to relate ourselves to the scribes of old. We don't want any interruptions. There was a woman that was very famous in the Bible. She was the daughter of Asher, of one of the children of Yaakov. Her name was Serach. And our rabbis say that she lived for many, many years. She lived not only at the time of Jacob, she lived even in the time of Moses also. She must have been several centuries old. Why was that so? Rabbi Soloveitchik also says that she is sort of a link between the patriarchs and Moses. Don't think that Moshe Rabbeinu appeared out of nothing. He is the continuation of many things from before. You know, many a time you hear children minimize the importance of the opinion of other generations, of their parents, of grandparents. They think they know it all. Have you read Lord Jonathan Sacks, one of the most prolific minds in Judaism today? He's the former chief rabbi of the UK. He quotes Mark Twain, who in one moment wrote that when he was 13, he thought his father was an idiot. Then he says, but when I was 20, I was amazed at how much my father had learned in only 7 years. Obviously, he had matured, and he understood what his father knew at the time when he was 13, but he couldn't appreciate very much. So that in a sense, we need the new, but we cannot throw away the old. Our sentiments are age-old, are based on many, many things that happened in the past. Technology changes very much, but morality does not. The same principles of goodness, of loving your neighbor, are still valid today as they were many, many years ago. Maybe in a sense, one could even argue that they're even more valid today. Have you been to Israel lately? Things change from day to day. If you are not there for a few years, you think you're in a different country. But you know, Israel of today is really based on the work, or on the thought rather, of many, many generations, hundreds of years ago, that never abandoned the idea of the return to the land of Israel. But it is in a very real, concrete fashion based on what the Chalutzim, at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, what they did, the work that they did, we are the beneficiaries of that today. So when you look at your father and you think that he is very old-fashioned, he really doesn't know what he's talking about. Think about what Mark Twain said. At 13, he thought his father was an idiot. But when he was 20, he marveled at how much his father learned in a mere 7 years.